Hey, good Thursday morning, everybody. Welcome to the Volquest Mailbag Podcast. I am Eric Kane, alongside Rob Lewis, Austin Price, and Brent Hubbs. This podcast, as always, presented by our friends Exterior Home Solutions. If you need roofing, siding, windows, or a garage, contact Exterior Home Solutions today. They've been local and trusted since 1999. Give them a call for a free estimate. That's at 865-524-5888, or visit them online at exteriorhomesolutions.com. We've got a full bank of questions, so let's not waste any time. Let's go ahead and get into it. Let's go to Potato Quest. Can Canvion Lang be a center next year? Is he the front runner, and what positions do you think need to be addressed in the portal based on who you think might not be back? Austin, if you want to start us off here.
Well, I do think he's the front runner because he's the one that they put a ton of work in with and continue to do that. I mean, is he going to play this year? Probably not. I mean, maybe he gets in the UConn game or a blowout game if Tennessee has one. But, ultimately, I think he would be the front runner just because I think he's the best center body. But ultimately, they're going to attack every position in the portal, I would imagine. Like, I don't think that there's one that they don't. I mean, all the tackles, the guards. Obviously, you like their recruiting class, Hubbard, that they're bringing in. We'll see if they can add Jordan Seaton, which would really be that'd be a big cherry on top, but it would be. But I just think they're going to need experience. It's unrealistic to think that some of the players they have currently are going to just flip the switch. Maybe they do, but I think it's a little bit, far-fetched. And then, I think it's, unrealistic to think these freshmen are going to come in here and start right away, at least most of them.
Yeah, I mean, the offensive line is the biggest portal need on this team, and it's at all spots on the offensive line. You take the four best guys you can get. Now they've got to be some tackle bodies. You can't take four guards, but I mean, you're going to take some guys who can come in and play. And then the question is going to be, what other positions are you going to be looking at? Because it feels like you probably need to look tight end, receiver, and then maybe defensive line, depending on what happens with the COVID year guys, who comes back, who doesn't come back. So I think it's going to be a very active year in the portal for Tennessee. And I think it's going to start with that offensive line as the biggest priority, Eric.
I will say this before we move on. Much like the defensive line, and Hubs just referenced the COVID years, like on the offensive line, who could come back? Mincy, Spraggins, Coop, John Campbell. Now, I would tell you that they're all likely going to go, but in theory, some of those guys could potentially come back for another year. But I don't think that right now, as we said here, the early to mid-October, that's kind of where their minds are at. Now, maybe it changes, and that ultimately helps Tennessee knowing, okay, hey, we've got this guy back or that guy back. But right now, I think you have to prepare for all to leave, and if any of them stay, then that's good, right?
Yeah, and I think when you look at it, I mean, I think you're going to have some real conversations, Eric, in November. And that's probably not the real time that you want to have conversations because you've got a football season to play. But you have to have an idea of where you're going to be in December because of the way this portal window fits. You're going to have some early answers on who's coming back and who's not coming back legitimately. And then you got to decide, you're going to try to NIL somebody back. I mean, there's a lot of, we talk about it every week or many weeks, roster management. Roster management for this offseason is going to be really critical for this football team because they're going to have some real decisions to make on some guys. And some guys are going to have some real decisions to make about the program as well.
Yeah, we'll all be thankful whenever the phase of the COVID years are done. Again, it's almost there. But there's just more and more conversations because you never had this option in years past, and you've had it the past couple of seasons. And some of these guys need to move on for the betterment of probably themselves. And some of these guys, Tennessee wants to move on, but also you want to have some of these guys back and have that luxury and take advantage of it. So knowing kind of where you are position wise heading into December, finishing out the regular season, and knowing how to attack the portal is going to be critical for Tennessee because there's a lot of guys, especially at the line of scrimmage, as you pointed out, that could return and could impact your team moving forward. Let's go to Rhett Lawyer. The kickoff return has become obsolete with everybody having a kicker who can kick it through the end zone or so high the returner has to ask for a fair catch. What rule change, Rob, would you propose to bring back the kick return? I sure miss the days of Dale Carter and others here at Tennessee.
I mean, it's simple. You got to move it back. I mean, if you want the kickoff return of the game, but I mean, I think clearly the powers that be, are fine with the way things are. And I get it. The concussion protocol issues. I mean, that's a I guess an area of high frequency occurrence. If you're flying downfield, busting wedges. So I don't see them doing that, guys. I mean, I think that if anything, they're phasing it out because of the injury factor.
Yeah, I will say this could be a D. Williams or Cam Selton game when you look at this matchup. Texas A&M only has 21 touchbacks on 39 kicks. They've given up 3 kickoff returns of 30 yards or more, including a 92-yarder for a touchdown by Miami in week 2. So this might be a kickoff return weekend, maybe.
He's had that one in the holster.
I was going to say,
he's just been waiting. He's had that one locked and loaded.
Couldn't wait for 10 things, Rob. Had to get it out here on the Mailbag Podcast.
I'm just saying, this is not a team that has kicked the ball consistently in the end zone, and now they haven't got not a lot of teams have fair caught it either for touchbacks. So we'll see what happens this week. How aggressive is Tennessee going to be there?
Let's go to Memphis Mitch 14. A couple questions here. A&M's rush defense has been great so far this year. Vols' rushing attack has been just as good. What do you guys anticipate happening, Austin, in the matchup between the front seven and Tennessee's run game, and also about the A&M's front seven getting pressure on the quarterback? Do you think that Tennessee's tempo on offense could possibly slow down some of their pass rush?
Well, Hubbard had this in the stock report where he said Tennessee's run game was stock stagnant for him. And I got his point, right? I mean, Tennessee's not really played anybody through the first 5 games outside of South Carolina and Florida. And South Carolina wasn't great. And Tennessee's one game they really played Florida, who's ranked, in the 30s, Hubbard, or whatever. Like, they were just okay. I mean, like about 100 yards wasn't good enough. Now, they did abandon the run for a chunk of that game. But my question to Hubbs, once we got on tape in the stock report, is I could also counter with Tennessee had their best 5 finally for South Carolina. Cooper's back. How much does that play? I think you find out a lot this week, which is why Hubbard's stock stagnant was accurate. Because after this week, they could be, or they could be really stock up. You just don't know. I think to this point, A&M has played A&M's defensive line has played a lot better offensive lines than Tennessee's offensive line has played better defensive lines. So to this point, I would give the favor to Texas A&M. Can Tennessee get over 100 yards rushing? I know Hubbard's magic number is 150. We'll see about that, but I think you'll find out a lot about how important Cooper was, which only increases his NIL value if you want to try to bring him back Saturday against Texas A&M.
Rob, the interesting thing too is, A&M's been really good, but they haven't played true spread teams. Sideline to sideline. So how spread out can Josh Heupel get A&M's defense? Because that's the whole concept. You spread it out, you try to get to double teams and create creases in the run game. How does A&M fare when maybe it's harder to load the box to stop the run, which is what they did against Alabama, because Alabama's playing in a much tighter box, a tighter window, if you will. So I think there's some scheme that'll be interesting to see what DJ Durkin's counter is to Tennessee's scheme and what's Tennessee's scheme. What do they do to try to create a lighter box against Texas A&M's front?
Yeah, I was going to mention you put this out on Tuesday, however, how they against Alabama, Texas A&M was able to play mostly with one safety high and really controlled Alabama's ground game. Now they gave up big shots down the field enough to cost them the game, and you wonder, the way Tennessee spreads people out, man, can they really afford to play that one safety high in order to try and bottle up the run game? And I think it'd be fascinating to see what they come out in. I mean, do they think they can do it from the start? Because, man, if they really do, just go with the one safety high look, that's a lot of open space. The way that Tennessee will spread you horizontally.
With that blistering October heat that's going to be at Neyland Stadium on Saturday night, I could see DJ Durkin's counter being, a lot of cramps, as we saw that in the Ole Miss game back in 2021.
Oh, wow. That's a great point.
I don't know if that was all DJ Durkin or if that was the head coach with his code signal, right? AP, he had Lane Kiffin had his codes for guys to fall down. But to answer his question about the tempo, it's all about making that first down. If Tennessee can make the first down, then you can start really getting those defensive linemen running, and that's what you've got to do. But to do that, you can't go quick 3 and outs, and you've got to win. You got to win early downs to make third down manageable. So there's a lot of factors in play here. If Tennessee can get into their tempo, then yes, I think it can stretch and slow down the pass rush. The challenge for Tennessee is going to be getting into tempo. They've got to win early downs to do that.
So, Brent, on that, C.S. Giles has a question about, we're always talking about, and we just now are, tempo, wearing out A&M's good defensive front because it's the strongest unit, getting first downs. How would you attack that offensively? Is it the horizontal passes, the screen passes out to the perimeter, the quick slants? Joe Milton was throwing better over the middle of the field last game. Steady run game. Kind of what is your philosophy offensively in trying to get that first down?
Well, I think it depends on how A&M's lining up. Right? I mean, if it's a loaded box, you're going to have to throw it, right? AP. Otherwise, I think you're going to be very likely in 2nd and 9, and then you're not where you want to be. So, Tennessee has thrown a lot on first down this year because it's been some of the sideways stuff. But if they're loaded the box on first down, and I think you got to look at throwing the football and trying to create some positive plays that way to get into that first down.
Agreed. I mean, and so much of what Tennessee's has done this year has been side to side, right? I just think that's not where you can go in this game. I'm not saying you can't do it a little bit early, but at some point you're going to have to take some shots to loosen them up. And I think loosen them up for the short stuff, loosen them up for the running game. I think it's going to be paramount to as Hub said, to have success on first down. To really kind of get the mojo going, because Tennessee needs the crowd in the game early. They'll be in it on defense, but I think you want them in it on offense too. I mean, I think you want them to have some excitement, because I think that just feeds the beast even more.
Well, and we've talked about this all week, and it goes hand in hand with the tempo. You got to avoid those negative plays. Tennessee was great at doing that against South Carolina, and Texas A&M is tops in the country as far as tackles for loss. Did it against Alabama, and the importance of staying on schedule if you want to be able to play with tempo is paramount.
Kelsey Pope again was asked, this is back in fall camp, it was more of a question about offenses translating to the NFL with Tillman and Hyatt, but it ranged true. He said, hey, our goal is to get these guys in one-on-one matchups down the field. Tennessee's going to have those opportunities. Brian, how many times were they playing man coverage, against Alabama last week? There's going to be opportunities, and depending on where your run game is, again, we talked about that rush defense for A&M all week long, 84 yards on average. Maybe you're not having as good of a day as you want, and so you're going to need to force the ball down the field, or not force, but throw the ball down the field. You're going to have those one-on-one matchups. There will be opportunities there. So, Austin, I completely agree. You need to take advantage of those. You're not going to hit every one. You never will, but you need to be better than 8 of 30, which is where Milton currently is at 20 yards or more down the field. So
here's one last thing before we move on to the next question. Because Brew's out, and I know he was it the Austin Peay game, he got called for a holding or whatever, but like his ability to block out there in the screen game is so undervalued by a lot of people. And I just wonder, when you all of a sudden have Chip Nimrod and Caleb Webb and Dante and those guys out there, or they're not as good, they're not as physical, do holding penalties hurt drives if they try to go with a lot of the short stuff? Because all of a sudden you taking what was going to be a 4-yard gain on screen turns into a 10-yard going the other direction with a holding penalty, and all of a sudden you're playing at 2nd and 20.
Well, and here's the other, you're exactly right. Here's the other thing too, to your point, Eric, about the one-on-one matchups. Don't fall in love with the deep shot the entire game, right? Yeah. Don't forget you got a running back.
Don't forget who you are.
You can get them in the flat. It's easy to say loaded box, one-on-one, let's throw it deep, right? That can't be your entire offense. And I think at times with Josh and Joey Halsey this year, they've gotten away from some balance. And I think it's going to be imperative that it doesn't become a deep shot fest if it's one-on-one out there the entire game. You got to take some of those, but that can't be your entire offensive plan, because you've just not shown that you can hit those consistently enough.
Yeah, no doubt. Don't get away from who you are. Run your offense, but try to take advantage when that's given. Let's go to Huntsville Vol 3386. Couple questions here, Rob. We'll start with you, and we'll go around the room. Offense and defensive MVP for the Vols to win on Saturday. Rob, who's on offense and defense? Who's your MVP if Tennessee wins?
You would always go with the quarterback. That's an easy answer. But offensive line. We've talked all week about the matchup of. Tennessee leads the SEC in rushing yardage. Texas A&M leads the SEC in rush defense. So I go there. Tennessee. I will say, EC. What's Texas A&M give up? 84 a game? Is it 80
on the ground? Yeah,
84 a game. Tennessee's at 231. I think it's easy to say whichever team is closest to their average when the day's over, as far as yards given up running or yards gained. Well, I would tentatively say that'll be your winner. And man, pass rush defensively. If you want an individual, Tyler Barron, James Pierce, I mean, just keep doing what you're doing. And I mean, Tim Banks talked about it earlier this week about how much, I don't know if easier is the right word, but simpler it is as a defensive play caller when your guys are getting home. I mean, it just takes so much pressure off of you and lets you be so much more creative. And Tennessee needs to keep doing that. Texas A&M gave up a lot of pressure to Alabama, and Tennessee, like I said, to be yourself. Keep doing what you've been doing.
Kind of in that same vein, I would say, and again, you need to hit a couple shots down the field. You need to take advantage of that. But running the football, Jalen Wright, go out there and be a dog. You've improved. You're obviously Tennessee's best back. I think you're one of the better backs in the SEC. Against a great rush defense, go out there and take advantage of that blocking in front of you and go have a day. So I'll say Jalen Wright. And then defensively, pass rush. You take Tyler Barron, I'll take James Pierce, just, whoever it's going to be. Austin, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, the interior of the defensive line is important as well. I think, Omar Norman-Lott, who got a little bit dinged up, last game, we'll see if he's able to go in this one. And then Omari Thomas, I think, Bryson Eason, I think those guys can be able to have that interior penetration, which makes things easier for a Pierce and a Barron out off the edge. And then Josh Josephs has been coming along. I mean, he kind of felt like he kind of got in the doghouse there a little bit for a game or two, but has started to make his way back. And again, the more depth they can have, that way they can spell Roman Harrison, spell James Pierce just a little bit to have those guys fresher, longer. I think matters.
Brent, who's your MVPs if Tennessee wins?
The defensive front in general. I mean, because that means they're getting to the quarterback. I think there, and then I think the other is probably Cooper Mays, because if Tennessee's going to win, then I think they're going to have to be able to run it just enough and protect well enough. Maybe Joe's legs, not from the standpoint that he's going to go 81 yards for a touchdown. What he has to do is he's got to climb the pocket and get out if there's nothing there, and understand 3 yards is a good play sometimes. Right? If you got in the secondary, don't get got and lose 7 plays, or 7 yards. Get got in your play call and gain 3 yards instead by scrambling out a little bit. I think that's the next step. We're going to call Joe a game manager. That's where he's got to manage the game better. Is he's got to make sure he avoids the big minus play and turn what should be a minus play into an even or a +2.
And my question to that, Hubbard, would be, has the brace on the knee gotten smaller, or is it still real big and bulky? Because I think that can have a say in how much he's able to move around a little bit. I mean, it's been 2 weeks, so I mean, how much better does it feel?
Yeah, but he still ought to be good enough. It ought to be good enough to where he's can avoid a 7-yard loss. I'm not saying he's got to run for 10. I'm just saying don't
get
take
back to the line of scrimmage.
Yeah, Rob's talked about this all week long. Just avoid that negative. If it's not there, you're not going to have a chance to go through 4 or 5 progressions, right? If 1 and 2 is not there, you got to look at getting out and getting going. He's not going to throw it well on the move. I think he's shown that to this point, Eric. And, it's just avoid the big negative play. Don't let 1st and 10 become 2nd and 17. Make it 2nd and 7 is my point.
3 yards of play sets up 4th and 1, and with this offense, Tennessee's going to go for it a lot of times on 4th and 1, so I couldn't agree more. Last one here before we take a short timeout. This still from Huntsville Vol 3386. Austin, for you, a little vague, but who do you think they can close with in 2024 recruiting? A couple big fish still out there and hoping to get them back on campus.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. I mean, obviously, Jordan Seaton's planning on being here for the Georgia game for his official visit. He had a fantastic time 2 weeks ago. That's kind of Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee. Tennessee's definitely in it, definitely in the mix. We'll see if they can get, they'll solidify even more with that official visit in November. Cam Michael, Colorado, A&M, Tennessee. His cousin just committed to Colorado. I don't think that's like a definite sign he's going to Colorado. But at the same time, I think it bears watching. A&M's also in it there. If you talk to different people about Cam Michael, they'll tell you different things. And then we'll see about anybody like whether there's a Kai Bates, I don't think anything's going to go on with Elijah Rushing, but I mean, I guess you never can say never. It's recruiting in the NIL era. You can't discount anything. Obviously, Tennessee's looking at some tight ends, whether it's a Max LeBlanc, a Michael Williams, who's the teammate of Jake Merklinger, who is likely going to, decommit from South Carolina, coming up here, in the relative not so distant future. And, we'll see what happens with any of those players. But, this is Daniel, let's not forget Daniel Hill. The more I talk to people, the more that one's bizarre all together, because I do think there's a divide there of one person wants South Carolina, other people want Alabama. Tennessee's kind of the number 2 for both parties, and maybe they, meet in the middle with Tennessee. I don't know. We'll see. I think that there's a lot to kind of digest. Where, however, 6 weeks ago, you'd have said, man, this thing. I mean, I remember calling Hubs going, man, I don't know what I'm going to write for the War Room this week. Like, this is awful. There's nothing going on. Now, all of a sudden, it's like, okay, got a little juice here. Now, does the juice turn into anything? We'll find out. But there's a little bit there.
Well, Hubs does the entire War Room by himself. So.
I mean, you got three junior college players on the defensive line. Tennessee's actively recruiting. You get the running back who's committed to Arkansas, but Arkansas is in a tailspin. I don't think anything's going on there. But this is the time of year where some guys who committed really early are looking at two things. One, they're bored because they're not getting any love anywhere else. Two, they're getting a little antsy because they're starting to hear rumblings of what may or may not be happening at the school they're committed to. Florida starts losing more games. What happens there? I mean, it's got a chance to be a pretty wild end of the month of October and first part of November. Now, typically, you think it's going to be wild and it doesn't get that wild, but you never know. That's why you better keep recruiting guys if your school's out there, because anything can happen.
We got plenty more questions to get into here on this edition of the Volquest Mailbag Podcast. But first, I want to hear from one of our favorite products, one of my favorite products, and I'm sure it's one of your favorite products as well. That is Bird Dogs. Those stretch khaki shorts designed to fit slimmer through the thigh and leg, AP, that gives you that sculpted look, right? Bird Dog shorts, they do the exact same thing that Lululemon does, but they fit way better. Because regular shorts are made of stiff, restricting cotton, but Bird Dogs has fixed that issue by inventing a cloud knit fabric that looks just like khaki, but it stretches to fit way slimmer without sacrificing movement. Bird Dogs also uses anti-stink sweat wicking fabric that keeps you cool and dry all day long. Versatility is the name of the game with Bird Dogs. Whether you're wearing slacks, shorts, whether you're going, to a meeting, whether you're going to church, whether you're going out to dinner with, family on a date, whatever the case may be, those slacks, those shorts, versatility is the name of the game with Bird Dogs. I enjoy them, and I'm sure you will as well. How do you get some Bird Dogs? Well, a great deal going on. Go to birddogs.com and /VQ. That promo code VQ, birddogs.com/VQ. You're going to get a free Yeti-style tumbler with your order right now. That's birddogs.com/VQ, promo code VQ, for a free Yeti-style tumbler. You won't want to take off your Bird Dogs. We promise you that. And, of course, the presenting sponsor of the Volquest Mailbag Podcast, that is Exterior Home Solutions.
Life happens, and damage to your home can be extremely stressful. That's why it's important to find someone who offers efficient, quality work with financing options. Exterior Home Solutions, they value not only family, but community. And they're who I call when life happens, and you should too.
We continue on the Volquest Mailbag Podcast. Love this handle we're going to right now. Who is J.J. Peterson? Kind of fitting, because the other half of his question says, who were some prima donna recruits that you talked to that went to other programs? We won't go there, but does want to know nicest recruits.
Brady James.
Okay, we will go there. Wants to know nicest recruits you've talked to that went on to be elite, whether they came to UT, Brent, or they went somewhere else.
Oh, I mean, Kevin Simon was one of the nicest kids I ever dealt with in a recruiting process years ago. Obviously, he had, was battled injury all the way through, but he was a great guy to deal with. Ahmad Brooks was a linebacker that ended up at Virginia, if I'm not mistaken, before he went on to the NFL.
What about Kai Parham, Hubs? What about Kai Parham?
I don't remember. I remember him, but I don't remember.
He was in Ahmad Brooks' class.
I know, but I don't remember talking to him.
Also went to Virginia.
I know.
Yeah, Ahmad Brooks. But Ahmad Brooks was a really good player, who was a really nice kid, really, really fun guy to deal with throughout the recruiting process. I mean, look, we rattled off three prima donnas in a hurry, and that's just because of they were just challenging to deal with in different points. But there's been many more good guys who went on elsewhere, who, as well as guys who came here who were just great to deal with. I mean, you could spend hours talking about, just the fun, good guys that you dealt with in the recruiting process. Now, there's been some that just didn't tell you the truth, and those guys are a little bit maddening. But
Dalton Santos, the Peters.
Now, I don't think Eric Berry loved the recruiting process, but when you did deal with him, he was, a class act, as a preview of what he was going to be his whole time at Tennessee.
He was great.
I'll say this about Eric Berry. He's the one guy who straight up lied to me in the recruiting process, who got Austin Price the job at Volquest, but he straight up lied to me on Sunday, and I didn't much care for him till I got to know him. And once I got to know him, I understood he didn't trust me. He didn't know me in the recruiting process very well. Once I got to know him, just a terrific guy. But I was pretty hot with him that Sunday afternoon when he didn't tell me he was committed to Tennessee, only to tell Austin Price about 45 minutes later that he was. I was
Daily Times, baby. The Daily Times scoop Volquest. It was a great time. I'll tell you who was really good. He always answered the phone. He always did interviews with me. For an absolute big timer was Derrick Henry. Like he was. I mean, hell, man, he visited here like 5 times. Jay Graham got him and Derek Green. Now, Derek Green didn't turn out to be anything at Michigan, but he got both those kids here like 4 to 5 times apiece. But that was Dooley's last year, and they had no faith. Kind of like, when Miko Hardman was coming up here for visits, like he came a billion times, but didn't, never could see Tennessee turning the corner and just couldn't trust it enough to come here. And that's what happened with Henry and Green.
Let's go to Vol Nugs 1421. Austin, we'll stay with you. Would committed recruits rethink their commitment if Tennessee were to finish 8-4, or is that the floor record for the staff to bill it as a transition year? I guess what would it take, and this isn't just this year, this any year, what would it take for committed prospects to start looking around?
I don't know. I mean, I think the bottom falling out, 7-5. I think that would be worrisome to some. But you can say that for a lot of schools. And here's the thing: if you're a big time guy and another school comes chasing you, it doesn't matter if Tennessee's 10-2 or 7-5. You may just want to, go through the recruiting process again, and as Hub said, feel the love because you've not felt it in a few months. Like that, that stuff matters to kids. I mean, like it's, I know it for a lot of the people on our site who are 40 years old or 50 years old, they don't understand it, much like they don't understand, some of the alternate jersey colors. But to kids, like that's what matters. Like the other day somebody said, I don't understand who this Hayes Fawcett guy is. I'm like, the guy that does every recruit's graphic known to man. I mean, Hayes Fawcett is a young guy who has made a niche for himself. And, for older people, they don't get that because they don't understand the graphic game. But for kids, they think that's the coolest thing on the earth. So, they pick up the phone or they get on DM and they want him to do their graphics. So, what appeals to kids, isn't always wins and losses. Sometimes it is. But I think, 7-5 is probably that where you have to, probably do a little bit of recruiting of some of the guys you have committed.
Yeah, I think for a lot of kids, it's about the stability of the program. Okay, is a team in trouble if they lose? Is a staff in trouble if they lose games? Obviously, Tennessee's not. Okay, so there's stability there. Then the other thing too is the coordinator leaving? Are they going to change direction? Or is the offense not what they said it was going to be? The defense not what it said it's going to be? That might get somebody's attention more so than just the record. The record's a factor if that means the coach is in trouble. I think that's when the record becomes much more of a factor, and that's not going to be the case at Tennessee.
We're going to do a couple more here. Let's go to Big Vol 88. Brent, this looks like a question for you. If Dante Thornton does not produce this year, is he back next year? How would Thornton and the staff feel about this? It's always been Dante Thornton, best case scenario, one and done here at Tennessee. To this point, hasn't produced, and of course dealing with some injuries here. But if that doesn't play out the way everybody wants it to, that's not good news for Tennessee. But what's that mean for Thornton moving forward?
I mean, unless he's going to transfer somewhere else, he's got to come back. I mean, nobody in the league's taking him based on the lack of production. So, I would say he would be back if his production doesn't explode the back half of this season. Remember this about wide receivers, man. There's a ton of them in the draft every year. So, Tennessee had a Biletnikoff Award winner who didn't exactly go high in the draft, and Jalen Hyatt. So, based on his production right now, I don't think he has any choice other than to come back at this one unless he wants to transfer again.
and his ability to stay healthy, Hubbard. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, right now, I just don't see any way he's able to go pro.
He just didn't have enough tape. I mean, he didn't have enough. He hadn't done enough.
And again, that hamstring's going to flare up. I'm telling you, you're going to see. I'm convinced you're going to see a ton of Nimrod and Caleb Webb, down the stretch. And as I joked with Squirrel White Tuesday in the complex, where you put your pads on, wrap yourself in bubble wrap, pal. I mean, like this, he can't afford to get anybody else injured in the receiving corps.
Treat it like an AC joint sprain. Put that bubble wrap underneath the shoulder pads and just head on out there. Rob, VFL 83 wants to know, how many points is Neyland worth nowadays? Typically, it's 3 points to the home team. How many points for Neyland do you think?
Man, if it's like it was against South Carolina, which I can easily see it being, I don't have a problem giving Neyland a 6 point edge. I mean, maybe I'm biased from having grown up around it, but man, I feel like it was worth 6 points against South Carolina.
No, and it's also Tennessee's also a program that under Josh Heupel's played really well at home. So I mean, you got the crowd factor, and then you look at the history of and Tennessee's success at home, how explosive they've been offensively at home. It probably gives it a few more than 3 points as well. I mean, I think it's a combination of both.
And it's Captain Obvious too. I mean, you got to be good. I mean, you got to have you got to be able to give the fans something to cheer about, to give your fans some swagger when they come into the building. And it's when Tennessee gives their fans something to cheer about. I think we all agree it's as good as anywhere.
Rob will say with you, Zusafas says, is Dylan Sampson getting enough touches per game? I think we can all agree that he needs to touch the football. How they utilize those three guys with Jalen Wright clearly getting the most touches, always interesting game to game.
I'd like to see him get more, but I don't think Jabari Small deserves to be totally shoved, putting mothballs either. I mean, because if we're talking about that, aren't we talking about that's who you're going to take touches away from?
Well, it would have to be him because you're not taking touches away from Wright.
Wright's averaging, he's second in the league in yards per carry. So, I mean, I can see the argument for giving Dylan more touches than Jabari, but Jabari's a quality player too. I'd like to see Sampson get more of his touches out in space as a receiver.
Yeah,
personally.
yeah. I mean, AP, this doesn't feel like to me like this is a Dylan Sampson football game, unless they're going to play him out wide in the slot and do some stuff. With the pass protection and the defensive front that you have up there, I'm not sure where Tennessee's at with Dylan Sampson. I know he's improved in that area. This feels like it's more Jalen Wright and Jabari Small in the true running backs formation to me. I could be wrong. We'll see. But that's what it feels like given the history there.
Well,
I was going to say, hey, for running backs, this is the game. You better be ready to stay back in and help pass protect, pass pro. I mean, you can't be whiffing. Like, you're going to have some big blocks in this one.
Well, Jabari's always had the niche of being a really good pass protector, but he's whipped a couple of times this year.
Mm-hmm.
So his pass protecting needs to be better if he's going to stay on the field, because I mean that is going to be very, very important this week.
All right, we'll go two more. Austin, stay with you here. Vol_Nation3. You mentioned it a little bit earlier, but touch again on Elijah Rushing. Anything there as the Oregon bound?
I think that he's probably going to end up at Oregon. The family kind of got sideways with Lupoy back before he committed to Arizona, and I think some of that's gotten patched up. And I think Arizona didn't come through with all they need to come through with, and so thus, back on the open market again. It's the NIL era. Don't discount anything, but it certainly feels that way.
And then last one, we'll end with Greg 1 Vols. I think this is a Monday Night Chat question. I'm not sure if we got to it in the chat, but we're going to get to it here. More likely to happen: Tennessee rushes for 175 yards against Texas A&M, or A&M gets 4 sacks on this offensive line to Joe Milton. Rob, you want to start us off?
I'm going to go with just the easy stat line. I'll go Tennessee goes 170, or Texas A&M gets 4 sacks is more likely, just because if you look at their numbers, that's about what they average per game. And, I wouldn't be surprised to see that happen. I don't think that'll be a death knell for Tennessee either.
AP?
I'm going to go neither.
You got to pick one. Get one.
More likely.
Well, I guess more likely, I guess I would agree with Rob. But I think that it's most likely to end up with neither.
Yeah, I would
Brent?
agree. I mean, I'm not sure either one happens, but if one of those happens, then I think it's 4 sacks and not 175 yards rushing. Tennessee gets 175 yards rushing in this game. They're having a fun afternoon in Neyland State. Things have gone really well for Tennessee. Now, the last time they went against DJ Durkin, they rushed for over 200 yards when he was at Ole Miss, but he wasn't lining up at Ole Miss with what he's lining up with in the defensive front with Texas A&M. So. Now, I think it's more likely out of those two questions, I think it's more likely they give up the sacks than it is they rush for that much.
I would agree as well. And on all accounts, especially if you rush for 175 yards, I mean, you need to be winning that football game, especially against this defense. We will find out. Tennessee, Texas A&M. That is a 3:30 kick on CBS at Neyland Stadium, checkered Neyland. All the pregame coverage all week long right here at Volquest.com, and, of course, coverage throughout the game and afterwards. No better place. Your leading source for Tennessee football news and recruiting coverage. That is Volquest.com. Appreciate you guys for being here, sending in your questions as you do each and every week for the Volquest Mailbag Podcast. Big shout out to Exterior Home Solutions for making this coverage possible. It's East Tennessee's first choice in roofing. Use your trusted and local source for exterior home renovations. That's Exterior Home Solutions. A free estimate, 865-524-5888, or always online at exteriorhomesolutions.com. For Brent Hubbs, Rob Lewis, Austin Price, I am Eric Kane. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday, and thanks so much for tuning in to the Volquest Mailbag Podcast.